Welcome to Rumor versus Truth, your trusted source for facts, where we dissect the evidence behind risky rumors and reveal clinical truths. Today, we'll get to the bottom of claims around laxatives.
Well done. Of all the meds we've covered on this show, we keep getting questions about laxatives. They will not stop.
It definitely seems this topic is clogging up our inbox.
Well, let's not sit on it any longer then. I'm Steve, the pharmacist.
And I'm Don, the pharmacist, and I'm ready to plunge into some myths.
Quite right, Don. And we're going to flush out fiction about laxatives one claim at a time.
Hold on to your hats, folks. The puns are going to be flowing this episode.
And before we make any big moves, remember that this podcast offers continuing education credit for pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, prescribers, and nurses.
Just log into your pharmacist letter, pharmacy technician's letter, or prescriber insights account and look for the title of this podcast in the list of available CE courses.
And for the purposes of disclosures today, none of the speakers have anything to disclose.
So, laxatives are, one of the most commonly used medication classes. You think about it, does make sense since everybody poops.
Yes, like the classic children's book taught us.
Yeah, but forgot about the sequel, which is not everyone poops easily, unofficial. If too much water is absorbed from feces, stools get hard and become difficult to pass. That's pretty much constipation in a nutshell. And laxatives are the fix. They help keep water in the stool or help push it through the intestines to get patients back to being regular again.
And some treatments have been around forever, but that doesn't mean they've necessarily had good evidence.
Right. And that can lead to plenty of assumptions and hearsay.
Basically, we wanted to make this episode so we can bring evidence to a conversation that's been backed up for a while.
We'll have to have our producer put a pun counter up in the corner maybe to see if we can do a new record. But let's go ahead and start with, our first claim with a drug that somehow achieved legend status without the legend part being earned. And that claim is oral docusate isn't an effective laxative.
Yes, the classic stool softener. I still see it on so many patients' med lists. In fact, it's even on the World Health Organization's essential medicines list, meaning every health system should carry it.
Right. And it's been around for decades, almost, millennia. If you started out as a detergent in the 1930s, and it wasn't used as a laxative until 20 years later. So it's supposed to almost act like a soap before your guts. It lowers water tension so that water can better mix with the stool, leading to softening and making stools easier to pass.
That does sound nice in theory, Don. Very gentle, very polite, perhaps.
And very ineffective. Multiple randomized studies over the years failed to show that docusate at any dose has meaningful benefit over placebo, or pretty much with no laxative at all. And one 1998 study showed that psyllium fiber improved stool water content and bowel movement frequency, while docusate basically didn't.
So docusate has a nice mechanism story, but the bowel doesn't seem especially moved by it. So then why does it keep sticking around?
So, some patients and prescribers may think of it being gentle and therefore safer. But gentle's only a virtue if it's also effective. But we may be delaying care by wasting time with this laxative. We should be turning to more effective options instead. And current guidelines for chronic constipation don't even mention docusate as an option anymore. So going back to that claim, which is oral docusate isn't an effective laxative, the verdict is true.
Docusate, you had a long run.
And a very soft run, you might say. It does talk a smooth game, but the evidence doesn't really slide in its favor.
But you mentioned more effective options, Don. I'm sure the audience is wondering, what should we turn to instead?
So patients aren't taking opioids. We should typically turn to those osmotic laxatives first, such as polyethylene glycol or PEG, for shorts, 3350, and lactulose. What these do is they draw water into the gut to keep stool soft, and they have stronger evidence than docusate.
And if those don't work,
In that case, we have our next best friend, which are stimulant laxatives, such as senna or bisacodyl. These work by stimulating the gut muscles to push that stool along.
I would say if a patient is taking opioids, that is a case where I would use a stimulant laxative first, since we know opioids inhibit gut muscle movement. So that could be a case there.
Yep, exactly. And you can find a review of over the counter and prescription laxatives using our management of constipation chart.
It even compares onset of action, warnings, and more. And speaking of warnings here, I've seen this next claim drum up concern in prescribers and patients when folks need long term constipation relief.
Hmm.
And it's a claim that chronic stimulant laxatives damage the gut.
Well, where you start, damage the gut. Pretty dramatic there. So what does damage actually mean?
Yeah, pretty vague, right?
Mhm.
There is a prevailing thought, though, that long term stimulant laxatives like senna can physically damage the colon lining and nerves, and that long term use will lead to dependence, meaning that the patient won't be able to have a bowel movement without taking the laxative. I've sometimes heard this referred to as cathartic colon or even a lazy colon.
You know, speaking for the colons, I'm pretty sure they don't like that low blow.
Right, if they're listening.
Yeah.
And to see if this isn't just a lazy rumor, I got in touch with one of our specialty consultants, Dr. Nina Pasqua. She's not only a PharmD, she's also an MD and gastroenterologist, so a triple threat. Love it. And it's perfect for this claim.
Measure my seat, Steve. I can't tell what my gut feeling will be.
But we'll see.
Roll that tape.
Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Pasqua. I'm so glad you can give us your expertise on this. Before we jump into talking about using stimulant laxatives long term, what are the risks with having chronic constipation? Are certain patients perhaps more prone to it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Steve. And yeah, chronic constipation isn't it's not just something that's annoying. Actually, it's a real medical issue. And it actually hits women a lot harder than men, twice as hard actually. And there's several issues that could be related to that: hormonal, functional, anatomical. So yes, it does hit some populations more than others. And chronic constipation is something that really is important. Like I said, it's an important condition to get managed. And the reason for that is because there are, serious complications that can occur. Um, Stool impaction, where stool gets stuck in the colon and causes an obstruction. Hemorrhoids, which are blood vessels at the lower end of at the lower end of the colon that can engorge and bleed. Fissures or tears in the anal lining, and even where part of the rectal muscle actually protrudes out. And so, in these cases, worst case scenario, you can get a serious ulceration and inflammation that can perforate the bowels, and that's a life threatening condition. So hopefully for those individuals that are struggling with constipation, this is kind of a wake up call to seek sort of treatment.
Right.
Um,
And with those
yeah,
risks in mind, like how safe is it then to use stimulant laxatives in those scenarios chronically? Do they damage the
yeah.
gut like some people claim?
Yeah, so that's one of the, like, kind of persistent myths in, like, GI medicine. So I think it's worth sort of, having this conversation and really sort of debunking that. The short answer is that at the recommended doses, stimulant laxatives do not damage the colon. And actually, they've done reviews because this has been such a pervasive sort of myth out there that doctors, well trained doctors are even sort of talking about. And so they did a comprehensive sort of study or research that specifically looked to see if these medications, if there's evidence for harmful damage to the colon and to the nerves, to the smooth muscle, and they found none. Um, and they also found that there's really no evidence that they increase, colon cancer risk either. There might be some association with other factors, that people have that increase their, risk for colon cancer, and also, contribute to constipation, but it's not the constipation that's contributing to the colon cancer. So that idea of having that what they call cathartic colon, or fear that your bowels become dependent on laxatives and stops working, that's outdated, and it's supported by, modern research. Um, I do think that there's something worth mentioning, though, because you might hear about this or see this, is that when you do take some stimulant laxatives, you can get a pigmentation of the lining called melanosis coli that's associated with these certain types of laxatives, one of which is called senna. It's completely benign, doesn't cause cancer, and it actually resolves once you stop the medication. It may look concerning if you see pictures of your colon, but actually it's just a cosmetic sort of, it's a cosmetic issue. Um, I think the bigger picture here is, that people really should walk away with, is that treating constipation is much safer than leaving it left untreated, because of those complications that I mentioned, sort of previously.
Yeah, I like that you point out those benefits there. So we know that recommended doses are safe long term, but what about those rare cases of patients are misusing these laxatives? Let's say they're using them too frequently, or maybe at really high doses. Is that a concern?
Yeah. And I'm glad you made that distinction. Misuse is an entirely different conversation, and it is also worth taking, seriously. Historically, this came up with individuals that wanted to lose weight, and they were taking far more than the recommended dosage, in order to get all of that sort of food and stool, out of their system. And so the first major risk with taking too much is dehydration and nutrient and mineral imbalances. So taking too much can cause excessive diarrhea. And that means that your body isn't just losing water, but it's also losing important nutrients and minerals like, potassium, sodium. And this can lead to muscle weakness. And in drastic cases, it can lead to heart rhythm problems, and a bunch of other sort of metabolic issues. And so that's probably one of the more dangerous consequences of laxative use. And then, there's also the toll it takes, the direct toll it takes on your GI system. Overuse can cause painful cramping, nausea, diarrhea, and actually can reduce blood flow to the colon, because of sort of the volume loss, and that sometimes can lead to a medical emergency. And then finally, sort of the third piece is just the cycle itself. So when someone stops taking a large amount of laxatives, the body often will temporarily hold on to water, because again, they're so used to getting dehydrated and removing all that water through all these laxatives, that then when they're holding on to excess water, they get really bloated and swollen, and that can make people feel like, oh, I need to take more laxatives, because I'm bloated and swollen, but that's not swollen because there's too much stool, in your colon. So that becomes a difficult cycle to break.
Yeah, vicious cycle indeed. But this has been incredibly interesting. And thank you so much for explaining this gastroenterology topic for us. I'll bring him back to Don and see what he says. But thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Great, appreciate the time.
So it seems we are generally okay to poo poo this claim. Long term stimulant laxatives at usual doses, you shouldn't be a problem. It could be an effective option for patients with long standing constipation due to chronic conditions such as spinal cord injuries or diabetes.
Yeah, and chronic constipation guidelines in the American Gastroenterological Association back in February 2026 even stated that concerns about chronic use of stimulant laxatives in managing refractory adult constipation are unfounded. End quote. So, when it comes to this claim that chronic stimulant laxatives damage the gut, the verdict is rumor with conditions.
And the condition here being that these laxatives are safe at recommended doses, Dr. Pasqua said.
Very key point there. Although there isn't much published data, gut damage may be seen with laxative misuse, where patients inappropriately use high and frequent doses in
Mm,
situations like eating disorders, like we
yeah.
talked about.
So stay alert for patients frequently buying large amounts of laxatives, it could be a sign of deeper medical problem. You might be able to refer that patient to help.
And for more info, the National Institute of Mental Health has an eating disorders website with health facts, statistics, and support resources for patients.
So take a look at our show notes or description. You link directly that resource in pharmacist's letter, pharmacy technician's letter, and prescriber insights, as well as our management of constipation charts.
And if you aren't already a subscriber, don't miss out on these resources. Sign up today to stay ahead with trusted insights and tools.
And while we're talking about mental health, we've been hearing more internet chatter about this next claim regarding kids, constipation, and psychiatry. The claim is that polyethylene glycol, or PEG 3350, causes autism and behavioral changes in kids.
Yes, as a pediatric pharmacist, this one has gotten a lot of attention and I have heard about it. Understandably, it worries patients. But where does this come from is the big question.
Right? So that claim is based on the idea that PEG, which is polyethylene glycol, active ingredient in products, you've seen labels like for Miralax and Glycolax and others, could be absorbed and cause neuropsychiatric events from anxiety and mood swings to even autism. Some parents have reported psychiatric changes in their kids after taking PEG. In fact, FDA's Adverse Event Reporting System, also called FAERS or FAERS, had received reports of this in about 600 kids between 2007 and 2017.
And that does sound like a lot, but I think it's important to note here that these reports can't prove cause
Mm,
and effect, and sometimes not even a correlation. So
right,
keep that in mind.
right. And evidence we have shows that PEG 3350 essentially isn't absorbed into the blood. We're talking less than 0.5%. So systemic effects are unlikely. Plus, there's an assumption out there that PEG is the same as ethylene glycol, but it is not.
Ethylene glycol, as in automotive antifreeze,
That's the one.
which we know is very toxic.
Very, yeah.
Mm.
Yes, and 2008 FDA report did find trace amounts of ethylene glycol in several lots of PEG 3350, but this was likely as a byproduct from the manufacturing process. PEG does not spontaneously degrade into ethylene glycol under normal physiological or storage conditions.
So good that it doesn't degrade, but this trace amount, I'm sure, could concern some folks. That doesn't sound good as a contaminant.
Yeah. Don't worry, Steve. FDA still considered those trace amounts to be safe, and data after that report show that increases in blood ethylene glycol levels after taking PEG very, very small, enough to cause toxic effects.
Oh, thank goodness.
Mm.
But do we have clinical evidence that PEG does or doesn't cause psychiatric changes in humans?
Yep, that is the question. And the answer is no. Its human trials weren't designed to detect if it caused psychiatric or neurological issues. But we do have a 2021 study in mice that showed PEG changed stool consistency but didn't alter anxiety-like behaviors, and this may lead to a future human trial to look more at this.
Right. It's hard here to extrapolate mice to kids, but you got to start somewhere, right? And I also wonder if timing might have an impact here. Now that I think about it.
How so with timing?
Well, constipation is pretty uncomfortable, as many of us know, and I'd argue even adults have personality changes and get irritable with it. And could constipation itself, or maybe even the gas and bloating from PEG when you take it, could that be indirectly causing the behavioral changes that parents are seeing here? Plus, evidence shows that children with autism are more likely to have GI issues and take more laxatives. So maybe these factors are lining up but don't actually connect and could be sort of a chicken versus egg scenario.
Yep. Yep. That's all true points. That could be the case here. So let's go ahead and circle back up to that claim, which is PEG 3350 causes autism and behavioral changes in kids. And the verdict is rumor. We don't have reliable evidence to say that PEG causes behavioral changes in kids, and current animal evidence so far supports that there isn't a connection.
And PEG 3350 is still recommended as a first line laxative for kids due to its long safety record and ease of use for parents and kids.
So parents will ask, what about an alternative? So if they want to try it, watch for age restrictions on products, since some may not be appropriate for younger patients. For example, avoid oral bisocodyl for kids under 6 years old.
And check out our chart, resources for discussing medical misinformation to help parents navigate PEG claims that they may be hearing from social media or family and friends.
And now everyone's favorite segment, objectively, right? Fast facts.
This is where we jump into some nugget sized claims about laxatives to decide which ones get the stamp of approval and which ones need to be wiped from the record quickly.
Okay. All right. So the first claim is nicotine is safe and effective for constipation. The verdict is rumor. We found forum discussions online talking about using diarrhea side effects from nicotine gum and pouches to help with constipation.
Creative idea, but nicotine is addictive and can cause toxicity in high doses. So avoid it for constipation, please, and stick to laxatives with evidence. Now, our next claim is linaclotide and plecanatide cause fatal diarrhea, and the verdict here is true with conditions.
Yeah, so these prescription guanylate cyclase C agonists, say that 3 times fast, draw fluids into the gut to help patients with irritable bowel syndrome with constipation, or as we know, IBS-C.
Right, but both meds have boxed warnings. Linaclotide is contraindicated in kids under 2 years old and under 6 years old for plecanatide due to severe diarrhea and dehydration. Although no human deaths have been reported, juvenile mice died from dehydration in studies for both meds. And we know severe dehydration can be deadly in kids, hence the true with conditions.
Next one is claim laxative doses should be titrated to 1 stool per day. The verdict is with conditions.
Yeah, 1 time per day has always felt like a gold standard when it comes to laxatives.
Or more like the Brown standard. Stats show that 95% of US adults, normally have between 3 bowel movements per day and, 3 per week. Adjust regimens to keep patients comfortable rather than targeting an arbitrary number.
Well, that was indeed fast, Don.
Just like many folks expect out of their laxatives, Steve.
Indeed. But we also need to think about safety when it comes to meds, including in pregnant patients. So, our next claim is that magnesium based laxatives aren't safe to use in pregnancy.
You know, when I saw this claim, I did look up magnesium citrate and magnesium hydroxide in the Briggs Drugs in Pregnancy and Lactation reference, and I didn't even find an entry for them. It was just magnesium sulfate.
Right. And we commonly use injectable magnesium sulfate in pregnancy to treat complications such as preeclampsia in the hospital. It can also slow down uterine contractions during labor, which may make some prescribers and patients wary of using any magnesium products during pregnancy.
Okay, so interesting. Where does oral magnesium fit, even if it fits at all, uh, when treating pregnant patients with constipation?
Yeah, good point. Well, the 2024 American Gastroenterological Association guidelines on GI disorders in pregnancy say that dietary fiber, lactulose, and PEG should be used first line based on their safety evidence. But if you look at mother to baby, another trusted medication safety reference, it notes that magnesium based laxatives have low absorption and are unlikely to cause fetal issues in normal doses.
Based on that, makes that claim, which is magnesium isn't safe, it's just too absolute. So let's not throw the bowel regimen out with the bathwater.
Exactly. It's more nuanced. And magnesium based products are not flatly forbidden, but they also aren't the main option that guidelines highlight first.
Mhm. And as with any med, I would recommend that they be used at the lowest dose, shortest duration needed for the optimal effects. And the patient should ideally check with their obstetrician first.
Absolutely agree. So, when it comes to this claim that magnesium based laxatives aren't safe to use in pregnancy, the verdict is rumor with conditions. So, as long as we're talking about recommended doses at limited durations, like you said, Don, with adequate supervision, magnesium-based laxatives may be a safe option if first-line ones like PEG have failed.
Yeah, and with any laxative, I would want to watch for excessive diarrhea and dehydration. Those could be dangerous for mom and fetus in this case.
And to find out more, use our GI med use in pregnancy and lactation chart for details and med options for various issues, including constipation. And for our bottom line truth today, don't default to tradition and assumptions. Follow the evidence for constipation care when it comes to laxatives.
Yep. And when you lift the lid on some claims, you might be surprised at what you find.
Yeah, the data might just stink.
Yeah. So steer patients to effective evidence-based options and put side effect claims in perspective. Now that this episode has given you a dose of a relief around laxatives, claim your CE credit and access evidence-based resources from pharmacist letter, pharmacy technician's letter, and prescriber insights.
And if you're not yet a subscriber or you just want to upgrade, you can save 10% with our exclusive listener code RVT1026 at checkout. And there's an easy link in the show notes.
If you're already a subscriber, tap the claim credit link in the show notes or search your C organizer for this episode. And now, mailbag time. We got an audience question from last episode about Ivermectin that came in through our Send Us fan mail link in the podcast show notes. They wrote, I saw the kids list was updated. So can Ivermectin be used in all kids?
Good question about the key potentially inappropriate drugs in pediatrics list or kids list. And we'll try not to kid around too much in our answer. It does deserve the grown up treatment.
If you're curious, just scroll your feed for the bonus mailbag and you'll find our full answer there.
And if you're straining to have your laxative questions about this episode answered for our next bonus mailbag, let them loose by sending us a message.
Email us at rumorversustruth@trchealthcare.com or send us fan mail right from the podcast show notes. We also use your suggestions and feedback to plan our episodes.
And join us next time where we'll take the pain out of claims around opioids.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. Although all of them are good, right? I promise not to overprescribe the punchlines. Thank you for joining us on Rumor versus Truth, your trusted source for facts, where we dissect the evidence behind risky rumors and reveal clinical truths.
We'll see you next time.